Ready to find your flow? AFSA's got you covered.
That's right. The hands-on training lab in Richardson, Texas is where you trade PowerPoints for pipe wrenches. Real tools, real systems, and real experience you can actually use.
And if you're ready to test your skills, check out the hands-on NFPA 25 workshops, where you'll inspect, test, and maintain live sprinkler systems and fire pumps. No simulations, no fluff, just pressure, flow, and know-how.
It's the perfect way to get under pressure without cracking under it.
So get fired up and register today at firesprinkler.org. Spots fill faster than a charged branch line.
AFSA, where you don't just learn the code, you live it. Welcome to the K Factor podcast, where we turn up the heat on all things fire protection. Brought to you by the American Fire Sprinkler Association, this podcast sparks conversations about the latest technology, trends, and tools shaping the industry. Join the AFSA tech team as we fan the flames of innovation in fire safety.
Welcome to another episode of the K Factor podcast. We really appreciate you tuning in and listening. It's already been outstanding on how many people have downloaded and listened. We have a great opportunity today to speak with Jeff Lewis, the VP of Inspections and Learning Development for VSC. Thank you for being here, Jeff.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So, Inspections, Learning Development. Could you tell me a little bit
what does that mean? What exactly? It's like two full-time jobs. So basically, from the inspection standpoint, is I'm over all the technical aspects of inspections for VSC. What does our contract look like? What are we selling? What does our service look like? How are we training our technicians? How are we training our support staff? There's just so many facets, not only from the standpoint of, what does it look like at our point of delivery or our point of service and what that inspector is doing inside of a property, but also what happens when it comes back. How are we dealing with deficiencies? How are we quoting them? Is there a systematic approach to that? And then when you look at learning and development, it's really a much larger encompassing process where we're really starting to take a look at every position in our company. I mean, when I say every position from like president down, what does it take to be trained to be successful in that role? So what we're trying to do is build a training module around every position that we have so that our people can be successful. If our people are successful in the roles that they're assigned and they understand what their roles are and they can perform the roles, the company will be successful. So it's a really broad, it's more than just inspections, but that's just my corner of the world. So that's where we're starting. So that's what it's all about.
You said that sounds like 3 or 4 full-time jobs.
It's, well, again, I was trying to be politically correct.
Fair enough. So tell me, we had a little bit of a conversation leading into the podcast that you worked with, was it 13A?
I did. So I actually started in inspections in 1990. So from 1986 to 1990, I was a firefighter. Came into this industry in 1990. Of course, NFPA 25 didn't come around until 1992. So we were out doing inspections where, quite frankly, our manual was NFPA 13. We were going into buildings and we were looking at the hazard. We were pulling tape measures on sprinklers. We were going above ceilings and looking at hangers. I mean, it was like the Wild West, man. We were writing up pages and pages of deficiencies, based on, the installation standard. Forget whether that was the standard that it was installed under at the time or not. It was whatever book we had, So, it was literally, 25 came into being, and we started looking at it at the time, and at first we were like, what is this? We don't want this.
Typical fire protection.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we know better than this, but as you started dealing with, you started seeing that, hey, look, no, there's logic to this. There's sanity to it. It's not fair to a building owner to have to reevaluate their fire sprinkler system every year. An inspector walks in. It's not fair to pull a current NFPA 13 on a system that was installed 10 years ago that, what is in there was perfectly acceptable to that, standard from 10 years ago. So 25 brought about, a couple of things. It caused us as an industry to take a look and say, wait a minute, what exactly are we doing? What is the purpose of an inspection program and a testing program? When I say inspection, I mean the inspection, testing, and maintenance. And 25 brought some order to that, and it gave us a standard approach that we could take, anywhere in the country with a standard document and say, hey, look, this is a standard of care that applies to your system, Mr. and Mrs. Owner, and we can apply it. We can apply it uniformly. We can apply it fairly, and create some consensus or have a consensus around what it is we're out there to perform and do.
Was 13A as frequency based, or was it just typically you go out for an annual? And
well, being an A was full of should.
Okay.
You should do this, you should do that. And memory serves it, and this is going back a number of years, so my memory may be failing me, but there was basically, some wording in there that, you should have it inspected and tested. You should be doing this. And as part of that, you should be conducting main drain tests, and you should be flow testing this, or you should be testing your water flow switches. I kind of cut my teeth in the BOCA code at the time. So before the ICC existed, BOCA was one of the model code writers. They became part of the ICC process, and BOCA had a lot of requirements in it to inspect. So you'd go into BOCA, you would look at what BOCA would say, and then you would try to apply NFPA 13A, 14A, and that to what you were going in to do. But it was a lot of should language and a lot of gray areas. Right. Interestingly, when I first started, this is kind of I find this interesting. When we first started in the industry, our allies were the insurance companies. They were really involved with us, many times showing up and going out and doing inspections right along beside us. And the public fire marshals were looking at us kind of with a stink eye, like, who are you guys? Who are you? And it's interesting now, the role has completely reversed, where our biggest allies are the public fire officials, whereas the insurance industry is a little more standoffish now. And my opinion on that is so that they could use subrogation lawsuits against our industry. But I mean, I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just saying it's just interesting to see how the industry has kind of shifted. Where, again, insurance inspectors used to, I can't tell you in my early days how many, I used to go out with inspectors from UL and IRI and Chubb Insurance and all these companies that were out there, and it was nothing for me to show up, and they would show up at the same time. We'd go through a building together. And really, they had a big hand in training me and showing me some of the things that, we should be looking at, and some of the things that they looked at from an insurance standpoint, say, hey, yes, this is truly qualifies as a sprinklered building, because in their eyes, just because it had fire sprinklers didn't mean it was a sprinklered building.
Right.
Well, and that very much kind of holds true to the training Josh and I had when we were at the insurance companies was, hey, we're kind of following more of that 13A approach of we're looking at whatever the latest and greatest, whatever code standards are out there. Even that 25 is now out. It's okay. That's great that it says that. We're going to go above and beyond our scope of 25, right? And from the insurance standpoint, it was we want the sprinkler system to still perform, and we want the standpipe system to still perform. So if there's some stuff that's technically outside the scope of 25, they still care about it. And I think that's kind of probably where that shift was as we moved away and tried to standardize, okay, what does that inspection look like and stay fair to the building owner? The insurance companies were like, we've still got money on the line. And I think that's probably where that shift happened. But it's very interesting that kind of seeing that dynamic change, I guess, over the years. But I feel like the insurance companies are probably still running close to that 13A approach.
They very well may be. And, of course, they're going to look at it from the standpoint of just, what's the probability of a fire in this particular type of hazard classification? And let's face it, ensuring a buildings such as what we're sitting here now at the AFSA, that's mostly a mixed use business type occupancy. You really don't have any hazardous activities taking place in this building.
Have you been in Bob's office?
Oh, true.
That's kind of hazardous.
True. Wherever he is a hazard.
Fair enough.
But when then you compare it to, let's say, a warehouse or a heavy industry manufacturing center, we get the fact that there are going to be AHJs that are going to apply standards of care differently. And one of the unique things about the insurance industry is because they have money on the line, they can step in when no one else can and say, okay, you can elect to do less than what we're asking you to, but we're going to raise your rates.
Right.
And the owner has to make a financial decision saying, well, do I want to keep my rates low, and do I want and pay more for I'm not going to mention any company names here, but we have a particular large distributor that they pay for 2 full-blown annuals a year. Their risk assessment says they don't want, just an annual inspection and then the quarterlies or semi-annuals. They want 2 full-blown annual inspections a year and everything that it entails. And some could look at it and say, well, you're overselling what the code says. Well, the code's just a minimum. And you understand, no one that writes the ICC or that writes NFPA 25 is going to open up a checkbook and write a check to a building owner that experiences a loss. The owner has to take some role in assessing what their risk tolerance is. So in the process of taking their risk tolerance, this owner came back and said, no, we're going to pay for 2 full-blown annuals a year. That's just what they wanted. Okay, fine. That is what we do for a living. It's okay. I will do 2 full-blown annuals for you for a year.
I like weekly contracts myself.
Well, and you kind of mentioned they step in and do the things that, nobody else really wants to do, and they're kind of stepping up to fill that role. But I kind of feel like 25 kind of left that as a spot for them, because we're kind of tied in what the scope of 25 allows us to do on the contractor side. Hey, we're supposed to report on whatever we see. It's up to the building owner to get it fixed. The AHJ is kind of the enforcement role, but a lot of these fire marshals are, through no fault of their own, just so tied up with not only 25, but 13, 14, all the other installation standards, plus life safety. And they've got a lot on their plate. So they're really coming in, kind of leaning on us to say, okay, are things in good shape? They're looking at, I don't want to get into a tagging discussion, but that's kind of where this always goes is, okay, what tag color is there? And what does that mean? They're kind of trying just to move through, hit the high level stuff and keep moving. But some of that low hanging fruit where it's, the fire marshal didn't say anything about it. Well, that's where the insurance guys can come in and say, okay, we're going to take a step back, right? We're going to take a look at all the stuff that, the fire marshal is kind of moved on from, but we still need to get done. So I kind of feel like that's kind of their sweet spot. But I feel like that's something that I know at least I didn't realize when I was with the insurance company was I didn't realize that was where my role should be. Is like I feel like I'm just kind of hammering them on stuff that is it important? Yeah, but I was like, I don't know why nobody else is kind of hammering you on this. And until I came here and got kind of the other perspective, and it's that's why, because it was kind of outside of their scope. Do
you think that shift from insurance to AHJ happened around the time of more making it required in 25?
I believe so, but it's interesting. I want to tag off and ask, since you both have some experience coming out of the insurance industry, one of the things that is a challenge in our industry is management of change. Mm-hmm. If we're doing a full, change in occupancy, our codes address change in occupancy. The NFPA standards address change in occupancy. But if you have an occupancy sitting here that has been the same for the past 20 years, our standards and our building codes don't address that. And that's one of the places where the insurance industry can step in and say, whoa, wait a minute. Originally you were storing these mattresses in corrugated cardboard boxes. Now they're back here wrapped in, a plastic wrap. And, nothing in 25, 13, 14, the ICC codes states that a building owner has to come back and reevaluate their hazard at any point during their occupancy. Once they get that CO, they have a CO, unless they make some sort of significant change. And I think that's a role where the insurance companies, to your point, you're filling in that gap. That's kind of why you're hammering people on things. You're filling a necessary gap that's just not there. It's not in our wheelhouse. It's not in your code officials' wheelhouse, but it certainly fits that insurance role because they're going to come in and say, hey, your hazard has changed.
Sure. That's and it's kind of touchy because also your insurance companies are betting money. Mm-hmm. So you're not necessarily going into your lower value. So sometimes our experienced inspectors maybe came from the design end or the install side. And that's where it kind of gets hairy, right? Because they start putting stuff or bringing that to the attention of the owner. And how do you balance that on the contractor end?
And again, for us, I truly, I don't want any of our people to walk away from something that they're looking at and say, that's not right. That's not right. So we have a tool where our people, depending upon what their background is, to your point, they may have come out of install, they may have come out of design, and they walk in and go, this is wrong. We have given them a tool that is outside of our regular inspection tool to document that. We have a disclaimer on it that although we noticed these things while we were in your building doing an NFPA 25 inspection, this does not represent a full engineering review, but these are things we want to bring to your attention. Now, one of the problems with it, though, is, when does performance-based and, regulation-based come in? A lot of times you may walk in and go, wow, that fire sprinkler is too low, but yet that owner has done some sort of performance-based test and proven that that's actually where they want that fire sprinkler, and they have fire testing to prove it, and blah, 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 even though it might be outside of the listing or outside of whatever. So they have a performance-based model they're going for. It's very difficult for us on the NFPA 25 side to know, is that really wrong? Was it really installed incorrectly, or did the owner pay and have some sort of an evaluation done and say this is a performance-based issue rather than just a prescriptive based standard. So it does, when you really take two steps back, it gets tricky from an NFPA 25 standpoint. So that's why we retreat into the document and the scope and say, okay, we're going to remain within the scope. We're going to remain within, and there's a lot to do in NFPA 25. I mean, I know a lot of people get so obsessed over what the document is not. There's a lot in there. And quite frankly, if we do what that standard calls for, we greatly improve the reliability of the fire protection systems. And I tell owners all the time, they said, what should we be doing? I said, if you manage your impairments, if you manage who's coming into your building, if you manage who's shutting your system down and ensuring that your system is turned back on and ensuring that your control valves are open, just that little bit improves your performance of your fire sprinkler system considerably. Because as we know, even though fire sprinkler systems often achieve extinguishment, it's not their role. Their role is to stop the forward progress of the fire. So fire sprinkler systems are largely successful because the fire department, the manual fire suppression forces, get there and finish up the job that the fire sprinkler system started. So even though we do achieve extinguishment, it's not its primary role. So if we can just keep, as we jokingly say, I know you guys have some fire service and definitely fire engineering background. If we can keep putting the wet stuff on the red stuff, we can hold it until the fire department gets there. And more importantly, if we can keep the ceilings from collapsing, if we can keep the smoke production down. Although throwing water on it, we're going to get a lot of smoke production inside of a structure. But if we can keep the stairwells intact, we can move people out of a building. We can get them to egress, and more importantly, we can then get the fire service into the building to do their job. So in many ways, a fire sprinkler system is much like a OSHA program for the safety of the firefighters. And I tell them that all the time when I teach classes. I'm like, look at the fire sprinkler as an ally. It's there to help you and help protect your life as well, so that you can go in and do your job.
So one of my frustrations is every time that U.S. experience with fire sprinklers comes out on the inspections end, water is not getting to the fire. How do you think, as an industry, we tackle that and get that moving in the right direction? Because it seems like it's just plateaued and stays at the same percentage every time we look at the document. It
has plateaued. I'll be honest with you, I look at that as well, and I scratch my head a little bit going, what? I think we need to have some subcategories to that. Is it that water is not reaching the fire because, A, there's a control valve closed? And at what point was that control valve closed? Was it closed during the fire event? Is this a training issue with the fire service? Is it a training issue with security or risk man? Did they shut the valve prematurely? Was it closed at the start of the incident? Is it internal blockage? And if it's internal blockage, then are we doing, is our 5-year requirement sufficient? Are we sufficiently going out there and really examining the internals of these systems adequately? Do we as an industry, are we applying the 5-year requirements and the requirements for internal flushing, that once you go beyond, your system's 5 years old, we're going to do just a spot check. We're going to remove one sprinkler and open up one branch line and take a look. That's just hey, nothing's going on. But there's a laundry list of, if I remember correctly, 14 or 15 items that we need to be looking for when we're going in there. In fact, he's pulling it up now. Yeah. That I'm not 100% sure. Okay, so it's 16 items.
16 items, yeah.
That we
I think it's increased in the next edition
growing.
too. Yeah.
Right. So, but my point is when you see any of these items, we should automatically be looking at an investigation, which is a completely different issue than just, it's 5 years old and we're just going to go take a look. An investigation is very different. So I'm wondering if we're getting some issues blurred. And I say that because I've seen my own inspectors do it.
Right.
Get those 5-year and an investigation blurred. So I guess my question, getting back to your question, as I'm rambling on here, is I would love to see some subcategories of that to understand exactly what the problem is. Is it internal blockage? Is it closed control valves? If it is a closed control valve, when it happened? And then the other thing is it not matching the hazard?
Right.
Or, have we put, 12-foot racks in a building that originally had 8-foot racks or whatever. So I think they need to subdivide that a little bit so we have a little better data to work from.
Some more data to see if it's the valve status test technique, or I've always loved the one where is it go down a little bit. I think record of broken public mains in the vicinity with the inspectors we're teaching. So if you're cussing at traffic on the way in because they've dug up the ground, then we probably want to look inside the sprinkler pipe. But there's a lot there in chapter 14 to 25.
There's a lot.
You made a good point of I do feel like there's kind of a need to do a little bit more education there across the board, because I feel like that is one of those chapters that it's a short chapter. It's my favorite chapter because it's less reading. But outside of that, there are two very distinct things happening there. There's the 5-year assessments, which, like you mentioned, there's nothing really going on. We're taking a look just to kind of get our eyes on what's happening inside the system. And then there's this 16 item list that's now growing of, okay, if any of this has happened, we really do need to go find out how bad it is. And I feel like there's been some disconnect between, hey, these are two completely separate events.
They are.
That people don't really understand. And I think that's something that you mentioned we probably need to do a little bit more education, not only education for our contractors that are doing the work, but also education for our building owners. Hey, if you have anything that's going on that's not normal, hey, we're getting a lot of false trips of systems, things like that. Okay, what's happening? Is it an air problem for our dry systems, or do we have debris in there that's potentially causing issues?
Exactly.
Right? So one of those ones where I know I recommended, hey, ask when I was talking to the building owners from the insurance side. There was a couple times where I was like, hey, talk to your contractor, ask them for additional training on XYZ, right? So if you've got building owners approaching you asking for training, how are y'all handling that currently?
We'll go in and do it.
Sweet.
So in fact, in just I think next month I'm gonna be down at in Pawleys Island, South Carolina. It's terrible duty, but I'll be doing 3 days worth of training with the fire department down there. They have a really great program where they get out and they use their engine companies and truck companies to do a large majority of their regular inspections. So, you're talking about your ice cream shops, your T-shirt shops, your small, so the 2 fire marshals are more free to go do the more high value assets. And they do 100% of all their commercial properties in that area in a year. They get them done. So about every 2 years we get invited to come down and we just do a basic fire sprinkler class for the firefighters of what to look for. Just when they go in, what are some of the things some of the keys that they need to look for. But it's interesting. And here's one of the things I want to say. We do these 1-day NFPA 25 classes all over the country. Come in and get 8 hours of training. We do we start at chapter 1, and we spend a whole lot of time going through like up to chapter 5, 6, 7. Then we start petering out as the day goes on, and then we kind of gloss over very quickly. From like chapter 11 on out to 15, and I think that's why we miss some of these things.
Right.
So some of my tactics have been, you've got the association has been kind enough to let me speak at a number of our conferences, is to work backwards in the book, is take some of these back chapters and actually just do a class on those, because there is a lot of information there. And to our point, we get so hung up sometimes on what's not in there. We're not taking the time to read what's actually right there. I mean, I did a fire pump test once. And when we finished the test, I was working inside, and I had a tech outside doing all the pitot readings. And when we stepped outside, there was just rust and scale in some places, probably a 1/4 inch deep, just everywhere that we had discharged through this pump. And I'm sitting here going, man, that's either the system pipe wall or that's the supply feed pipe wall. But, I said, we need to write this up. This is one of these things that you have to deal with. And, I showed the customer, I walked out there, there's just rusty scale all over their parking lot. I said, this is your pipe.
Liquid pipe.
This is liquid pipe. And, another funny one we did where we were pulling out of a lake, I looked at the customer, I said, man, something's wrong with your strainers. He said, why can you tell? I said, because those fish guts hanging off of our diffuser aren't supposed to be there, where we literally pulled fish in, sent them through the pump, and brought them out.
That's not lunch.
And I'm like, I said, we shouldn't be seeing fish hanging off of our diffusers outside like that. So I said, that's called a clue. And I said, I think we have a problem with the diffuser. One of your strainers, or pulled the strainer up, it had a big like 6-inch hole right in the middle of it. It was like, oh, it's terrible.
Fire sprinkler sushi.
That's it. Yeah, the seagulls loved it.
No, I'm sure.
They loved it.
So what, in terms of when you're doing your learning development and working with your inspectors, what's your currently like pinch point? What is something that really kind of either irks you or something that you need to dial in?
Generally, we've become good data collectors. In other words, we give our inspectors tools, and I'm going to try to speak, a little more broadly. But we're used to saying, okay, you do a main drain test and you record your results like this. You do a fire pump test and you record your results like such. The biggest challenge we run is to understand what the logic is behind it. What are you evaluating? And we're good at doing a task and recording numbers. But where I see misses all the time is where you have to evaluate that. And I see it in a couple of different areas. I see it in trip testing of dry valves, and I see it in fire pump testing, where there's clearly something going on and it just doesn't get flagged. That's why we do a deeper review of those, and we can't catch them all, but we try to do a deeper review of those as they come back through our offices. But again, we're dealing with human beings. People do make mistakes. But those are pinch points. Sometimes you see, but conversely, when our techs do it and look at it and go, oh my gosh, look at this is a problem. We have discovered some very, very serious problems out there in the field and gotten serious water supply issues resolved and things that really improved the fire protection, not only for one particular customer, but probably for a segment of a city or a water supply, because there was like some 30-inch valve, a mile up the road that was half open and actually would have been affecting all the fire systems downstream of it. We just happened to find it on the one that we were testing. So I would say the biggest pinch point I'm seeing is connecting the dots from the task that we're performing and evaluating those results. Back when I started in the industry, we didn't have 25, and we had a requirement in the BOCA code where every dry valve had to deliver water in 60 seconds. So that became kind of a microscopic view, 60 seconds that we viewed everything. You'd come do a full flow trip test, this 3 year, and you got one result, and 3 years later, you do your two off year, and then you do another full trip. We just kept going back and saying, what's less than 60, less than 60, less than 60, then until we got to a point where, oh no, we got 62 seconds. That failed. Where in reality, what we looked at is, each year that we did it, we started seeing a significant increase in water delivery time. So it goes back to why is water not reaching the fire? The pipe wall was getting, wasn't smooth and clean anymore. We had, build up and stuff in there. And I don't know, used to get a inspector's test that would stop up. Do we were you take a coat hanger, you just ream it out, get the stuff out.
So you condition pop it, keep moving.
Now, inspector's test clogged, not now. Well, now we know, no, stupid, you write that up. Because whatever blocked up, that is going to block up ahead somewhere.
This made it this far.
Exactly. So, so I have to applaud the committee for the work that has been done with this document on opening our eyes. And it's been a learning process for all of us. It's not like we were born knowing this stuff. It's been a learning process for all of us as we've evolved and we've worked at this and started looking at failures and what was going on. And actually the document has given us better information that we can go to our building owners and say, look, this is a problem because of this. And that's really where, some of our owners just want to say, well, you're telling me it's a problem. Why is it a problem? Well, now we can point to something and say, this is a problem because, or in our experiences, we have dealt with, X. And therefore, this is where we are. So again, I think this document has given us a lot to work with. And I think, if you're out there doing ITM, you owe it to yourself to really know the document, to read it and really know where to find the information and look at it, Yeah, I love it to see an inspector come in with their version of NFPA 25 where it's dog-eared, it's worn, pages have popped out of it, they've got notes written in it. I look at that, I'm like, yeah, there's an individual that's using their standard. When it still looks brand new, and it looks like they haven't cracked it at all. Now I know some say, well, I have it on my phone or whatever. That's fine. I get it. But yeah, that was what I used to always look at is when an inspector would come in and ask me a question is, what did their NFPA 25 look like? If it looked like it had just gone through, it had gotten wet from being out in the field, I'm like, yeah, this is an individual that's reading their standard and they're using it. It's out there getting used.
What other attributes or what other things do you think makes a good inspector?
I jokingly call an inspector a light blue collar job.
Okay.
So we get, here's my opinion, we get two types. We get a type that comes in that's really good at the paperwork side of the job, or we get some that are really good at the technical aspects of the job. I mean, you could put some of our people in front of any dry valve made by any manufacturer and they could tear it down, get it back up to work, it back up to work, and tell you what's wrong with it, whatever. But when they have to document that in a reporting method, it falls apart. So I jokingly call, the inspector is a unique individual, and it's kind of a light blue collar job. So it's part blue collar, but then it's part white collar. And as I tell our teams all the time that, just testing everything, but you've only done 50% of the job. The other 50% is to prepare the report to inform the owner what their status is so this owner can make some kind of an informed decision based on what tolerance or risk they have. You got to help them manage their risk. So we have to tell them where the failures are, where they're passing, what's good, what's bad. And therein is the challenge, getting tools in their hands to make it easy for them without dumbing it down too much. You mentioned tagging. I don't want to get into that either because that is a pet peeve of mine. These are complex systems. Tagging works very well with a portable fire extinguisher. It works really well with a kitchen suppression system. My opinion of a fire sprinkler system is they're too complex. There are too many variables, and that's the reason why we write technical reports. And I think that's what needs to be looked at as a technical report, not some tag color other than an impairment. Look, there's certain tags that mean certain things immediately, and an impairment tag I agree with, but I just really have trouble taking. I had to look at a report recently that a team of our inspectors had done. They'd done a high rise in a major city. And we were contracted we had several teams in there. We did everything from the sprinkler system to the fire extinguishers, fire alarm, E-lights. It was a 116-page report that was compiled at the end of this by different inspection teams. And you're going to tell me that I have to take a 116-page report and compile that down to, what color tag do I hang on a riser?
Let alone prioritize for the owner.
Thank you very much. So I'm just like, look,
well, in chapter 4 of the report.
Exactly. So although I think it's well-intentioned, I think that, again, it's well-intentioned, and not everyone agrees. This is my opinion. I get it. And I'm respectful to those that have a different opinion. And they say, well, we need help enforce it. Well, then we need to have conversations with our code officials. And that's really where it starts. We need to have open conversations with our code officials. And I think that's avoided in many cases. There are places in NFPA 25 where we're specifically told, go to the AHJ. And I don't think as an industry we're doing that routinely. Right. We need to go to them and engage them in conversation and say, look, these are the challenges we're facing. And they're actually interested. Many of them are very interested in what challenges are you seeing? What are you going through? How can we help? How can we work together? And how can we, they're going to look at it from one perspective. We're going to look at it from another. But the fact of the matter is we're trying to prevent, loss of life. But outside of loss of life, we want to protect those businesses. Those businesses matter. And they matter to the jurisdictions. A business that goes out for whatever may not ever reopen. Right. So it has an economic impact. Then if you lose something like a school or, a healthcare center or something, that has a tremendous impact on the community. What is going on in California right now is so large, so massive. It's you can't even get your head wrapped around it right now. But we're just starting to. They're still trying to get the fires under control and everything. But you look at what has been lost in those communities, and I don't know how many schools have been lost or whatever. That's going to have a significant impact on those communities, those students, those families. It's like, when Hurricane Katrina came through and so many people left New Orleans, a lot of people didn't come back. They established new lives elsewhere. It's just, I think it's going to cause a shift in where people move. And it could, I literally think, it could kill a small town if you had a significant fire loss.
Yeah, decent impact on the state itself, too. It goes even further than that a lot of times.
You lose a major employer in a small area, a rural area, that may not recover. Financially, the town, it may not just be the business, but the town may suffer. So it's beyond, look, we all want to sit there and say, look, we're life safety. I get it, we are. But once we get the lives taken and say, look, we can make this so these people can get out, the next step is sometimes looking at people saying, how do we protect your business? Which is actually a really good tactic, because sometimes business owners are more interested in talking to you about how do I save my business.
That interruption.
Then what, if I can save their business, I can probably save the lives inside the business as well. I mean, let's face it.
Well, that's one of those good discussions to have with those inspectors when you're, okay, let's do some training on how do we interact with the customer, how do we train them on this, and kind of what's their pinch points, what do they care about. It's one thing to come in and say, oh, you're going to do this because NFPA 25 says you're going to do it, and that approach doesn't get the most buy-in. But if you're like, oh, this is going to affect your business, if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen, and making that more relatable, I do think that gets a lot more buy-in from the building owner to try and help get to the why you need to do this. But I feel like a lot of times, not only do you have to be good at the inspection side of it and proficient in the technical side, but you're also doing a lot of education.
Customer service.
Yeah.
That's what the tagging, I think, is also cultural too, because you get those questions all the time from new inspectors that are, okay, so I've got a partially blocked pipe or whatever the situation is. What color tag is that? It's needs to kind of switch from that appeasing the AHJ to working, I think, to your point, and looking at this big picture of the owner, the building owner.
And I think some gets, that's a great point. I think we're missing a conversation with the owner obsessing over what color tag we hang. And where in reality, we put it on the report, we review the report with the owner, and we help them assess what that risk means to them. But and again, I'm not trying to be overly critical here, but we're obsessing over a tag color when we should be obsessing over communicating with the owner and communicating with that person that they understand what their risk is. And that's why, again, I don't like the tag color system. I don't like it.
Coming from Oklahoma State, I think they should all be orange, but I don't think people really like that.
I can get that. I can get that. If certain parts of North Carolina might say Carolina blue.
I like that. That's a pretty color too.
So I'm just saying, we could base them on whatever college is in there.
Feel like OU's going to struggle though a little with the red. Any of the red colleges are going to struggle a little bit.
Just stay away from it.
Well, here's the funny part. So VSC, our company color for a long time was red. Our trucks were red. Our tags were red. Well, that started presenting a problem as we began to expand and going into states that had a color tag. So we can't use our red tag. So we jokingly referred to us as Big Red and all that. I mean, now our fleet is white, but I had to switch some of our tagging to just a plain manila colored tag because red tags. People saying you red tag my system. Man, all our tags were red.
It's marketing. It's good marketing.
all our tags were red.
So in your opinion, do you think we have enough inspectors as is?
No, I do not. I really think as you continue to look, I mean, we're pushing people out months sometimes. People calling saying, hey, look, I need I need service, or let's not go into service. I need someone to come out and conduct, an inspection. We're like, look, we're we could maybe get to you in 2 months or something. And they're like, what? So let me call around. They'll call us back sometimes, go, we'll take it. Put us on your calendar because the other companies said they can't get to us for, 8 or 9 months. So that's telling us that we have more demand for the number of physical bodies that we have to put on the job. And we can take any aspect of our industry, whether it's a layout technician or designer, whether it's a pipe fitter, whether it's a service technician, or whatever you want to refer to that person, whether it's an inspector, we're short on all of them. And, we're an unknown trade.
For sure.
And, being able, now is the time, there's a shift in our society. There's a shift in our, in many of our public schools and things where they're looking and saying, hey, look at the trades over here. These are viable careers. And well, you two guys right here are, excellent examples of, a college degree and a trade are not mutually exclusive of each other. And it doesn't matter which way you put it. Do you learn the trade first and then use a company that will give you tuition assistance or something to go get your degree? Because after you get a trade, sometimes then it gives you a focus on, well, this is what I want. I want to become a project manager. So I'm going to go and get a degree in project management or construction management or something. Whereas at 18 years old, you may not have had a really good focus. But now you're sitting there going, hey, wait, this is the direction I want to take. So sometimes I understand why people go into the military sometimes right out of high school, because it helps give them that focus. The trade can do that. Look at the advantages. They come into the trade, they learn a trade, they're making money. Good money. Good money. In fact, I hear teachers all the time at our trade shows go, can you believe what they're paying our students? We don't even make that as teachers. And I'm like, hey, you want to come into the fire sprinkler industry? We'll find a spot. We'll figure out a way to fit you.
We'll train you up.
Exactly. But I mean, you stop and think about that. Most of our, many of our companies offer 401ks and all that. So you're taking an 18-year-old student coming in that, 30 to 60 days into their hiring process, they're able to pay into a 401k. They're able to do these. They're going to get insurance coverage.
For young ones listening, 401k is super important.
It's super important. Be surprised how many parents I deal with have no concept of what that is. No clue whatsoever. Yeah. So, when you're looking at, and again, I'm not anti-college. I have 2 degrees myself. I'm not anti-college. But if you compare that to, a 21 or 22-year-old coming out of college who's now starting to look for a job, and it may have done nothing. In other words, they've never looked at, think about how kids pick their college. I like their football team.
For sure.
I like this. They don't look at it from a standpoint of, what am I going to take that it's going to translate into getting a job? Right. Many don't look at that. And so they're coming out and they're starting to look where now you've got a young person that came into the trades, got 4 years experience. So now they're pretty much considered a trained employee.
Very valuable.
They're making, really good money. They may even have a company vehicle issued to them. They've paid into their 401k now for 4 years, and they don't have any debt. And then they may be looking at that point and saying, you know what, I'm taking some college courses on the side and, it's going to be a little bit longer road, but who cares? I mean, where is it written or etched in stone that says, no, thou must go to high school and then you must enroll in a 4-year, college upon, completion, then you get your career and everything's just rosy. It's not the way it is. The ratio that needs to be kept in mind is 1-to-7. And that's been true of our economy in the 60s. It's true for our economy now, and it'll be true to come. It says for every one job that's created in our economy that requires an advanced degree, a doctorate or a master's level degree, which, again, I like doctors, and I realize there are some careers that you must have a master's degree and stuff for. You two guys are engineering students. I get it. There's training and degrees that have to go into that. So for every one that's created, there are 2 in our economy that are created that require a bachelor's degree. But then there are 7 in our economy that are created that need some type of training that incorporates like a certification. It could be a trade certification, something like that. 1-to-7. And that's been true for a very long time, except in 2 areas of our economy. Would anyone like to guess what those 2 areas might be? 2 areas of our economy that doesn't hold true for.
It's going to go food service, but there's certs there. I don't know.
Education and government.
Okay.
And that's if you
interesting.
When you really look at it in those 2 areas, the 1-to-7 doesn't fit. They're way over, and sometimes they're requiring doctorates where a doctorate's not required. And so, again, when we really apply those ratios and we really look at what the demands of our industry are, we have 7 careers being created out here that require the trade certifications that we give. So it's about getting in front of these young people and offering them options and showing them just what a career in fire protection looks like. And many of them choose it because it's a great career field.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Well, and I know some of my experiences coming out was until I got out in the field, trying to connect what the book said was kind of difficult. It's like, okay, that's a great concept. I'm glad I have that knowledge, but it wasn't until we got out in the field and then started working that it was like, oh, that's what that was driving at.
Yep.
So there's been a couple of times where I was like, I actually wish I had done this backwards, gotten some of the experience so that when I saw it in the book, it would have made a bit more sense, and I probably could have asked some of those really smart professors a lot more about it instead of being like, okay, great, that's great information, let's keep moving. I'm trying to,
Yeah, but there's a football game Saturday.
Right.
And you're in that
pass the class. I'm trying to get through my homework and move on. Right?
There was a Harvard, I think it was a physicist. I can't remember his name right now, but he basically described the sage on a stage. He said, lectures are a way to transfer the lecturer's notes to the students' notebooks without going to the brains of either. So, when anyone who's been through college, we've all had those courses where you just, you're just taking notes. So again, I'm not anti-college. They have their place, but it should be focused on training. How do we train people for careers?
So I noticed on social media, VSC's been doing a lot. Was it Virginia area? I think the last post I saw.
Yes, so the Virginia chapter is heavily involved in working with. We have a school district down there that's really partnering really strongly with us and allowing us to pilot a number of things. So it's in Henrico, Virginia, but we also have outreach into Hanover and Powhatan and the city of Richmond. The Chesapeake chapter has got good, strong ties with Anne Arundel County, Maryland.
Okay.
I just presented to the Georgia chapter, so we can start building down there. We're working with the North Carolina chapter. In fact, I meet with Statesville City Schools next week. And we're going to look at what we can build down there. We have a high school down there in outside of Charlotte that's looking to want to put a fire sprinkler lab in their school, like we're doing in Central Virginia. So the pendulum is swinging back toward us, and I think right now is the time to strike. Now is the time for sprinkler contractors to get out there and say, "Hey, let's get in front of these students and let's attract our next group of talent."
So if the chapters, let's say on the West Coast. It seems like you have some discussions, and it seems like you're bringing the students in to maybe learn a little bit more hands-on. How would you suggest them to actually get it off the ground?
I'm going to tell you something. The low-hanging fruit right now, if I was just going to tell someone to just start from scratch, first of all, start taking a look at how many school districts you have contracts with to do any type of work for, whether it's whatever. Then reach out to that school district and say, hey, are there any students who would be interested in tagging along on an inspection or a service job or whatever? Are there any students? Because it's working at the school itself is very easy. It's easy for the school. So that's low-hanging fruit. At least we can start working with students right there easily and say what's going on. Second thing is to see who does career fairs, see where you can get in, but you got to have a good ground game. You got to be ready.
Right.
You got to understand what you're looking for, who you can work with, and it's more than just giving a young person a business card or something. Say, hey kid, call me.
Yeah.
I mean, something about it. You're Oklahoma State grad.
Right.
I guarantee your coach for football doesn't all of a sudden look at a kid playing football and go, hey, when you graduate, you hadn't playing football for me. Give me a kid, give me a call. No, they're recruiting. They're recruiting, for 4 years. They're looking at these kids coming along.
Middle school.
Yeah, they're going to recruit. And I'm sitting there going, if they're doing that for the football team, why should we not be doing that for our industry? As important as our industry is, why are we not recruiting actively the way that we should?
Waiting till they don't have enough experience.
Or after they've tried a number of other things and finally they stumble in. They always say you're either born into our industry, you fall into it.
Right. Let's
get a little more intense. Let's be a little more intentional. Let's get them and let's build a career path and let's get to some of these young people and start talking to them and try and see, hey, look, where they're coming from. We've started seeing some success from doing that, and it's a long game. It's a long process, but again, if it's important for a college football team, why are we not approaching it the same way? This is our industry. This is what matters. This is what puts money in our pockets. Why are we not recruiting that way? Military recruiters are. They know, buddy. They know those kids by first name basis. I've been beside them sometimes and go, and so tough.
Yeah, the whole story and everything.
Yeah, I mean, they know these kids. And I'm sitting there going, oh, we got to do a much better job at this. We have to look at what we're doing. So, you better have a good ground game.
Well, we really appreciate you.
It's been a pleasure.
This is exactly what we're looking for. These discussions I've had with you in the past, and really appreciate it. Is there anything that you'd like to let our listeners know before we head off?
The only thing I'm going to say is, to all of you out there that are in the industry is, let me challenge you to be good stewards of our industry. And by that, I mean, let's leave our industry as good as we found it or better. You know, whether you're only coming through for a few years and you're saying this isn't really right for me and you're going on, or this is your career point, maybe we're getting close to retirement or whatever. Let's be good stewards of our industry and let's leave the industry as good as we found it, or if not better. And I think, you know, that's critical. I think that's really important to all of us, is let's be good stewards of this great industry we have and let's leave it better than we found it.
Great thoughts. Well, check us out on Apple, on Amazon. We're on Amazon, right? I'm getting there. Spotify as well. And you're going to have to remind me of the other one. Podcast Addict. We're on all of the viewing platforms or listening platforms. Really appreciate everybody who's already listened, and we look forward to another discussion coming soon. Thank you. This has been the K Factor Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share wherever you tune in to podcasts, or head over to our website for more. Reach out to us anytime at technical@firesprinkler.org. Stay safe and always learn as we keep the fire protection conversation going.